The Global Commission on Drug Policy urges all governments to reflect on the lessons from the Philippines following Duterte's arrest. The Geneva-based GCDP called for accountability for the extrajudicial killings, promoting humane, effective responses through international dialogue and evidence-based advocacy. The GCDP is composed of world leaders and intellectuals advocating for a more humane and effective approach to drug policy. With us now for more, live from Sydney, is the former Premier of Western Australia and currently GCDP Commissioner, Geoff Gallop. So good to see you, Geoff, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Kathy. It's good to be with you.
So what does the Commission want the world leaders in the world to learn about the war on drugs?
Well, I guess there are two things. I mean, the first is, of course, that as a result of the creation of the ICC, the things that happen within a particular nation may very well be investigated by a body like the ICC with a view to following up as that's exactly what's happened here. The other very, very important lesson is, I think, that there ought to be some limits placed upon what executive governments can do in relation to people who use and possess drugs for their own personal consumption. I think that's a very, very important issue, and obviously that's one that the ICC is focused on.
I've come to know of the limits of GCDP back in 2016, having had the privilege of speaking with former New Zealand Prime Minister Helen Clark in 2019 and Virgin Group founder Sir Richard Branson in 2016. Both of them commissioners too, like herself, at the GCDP. I know that Helen spoke of decriminalizing drug use. And also, Sir Richard Branson, he did speak about decriminalizing just as well, choosing life over death and rehabilitation. What is the way forward then for the Philippines, you think, in the context of, first, the Philippines being an emerging market and in a developing nation at that?
Well, I think it's very important that all of us reflect upon the way in which our particular societies work and the way they are governed. And clearly there are people that have taken up the use of drugs for their own personal reasons or religious reasons or cultural reasons. But there are also some people who take up drugs and find that they're in difficulty. They may be addicted, they may have substance abuse, and we need to help those people. And the problem is with the system that was created back in the 1960s, a simplistic notion that if we really put tough criminal law in place, people will stop using and slowly but surely will phase out the use of drugs in society. It hasn't worked. The war on drugs just hasn't worked. And as a result of that, the system we have creates more problems than it says it can solve. You know, the temptation by governments to go that extra step in trying to cut down on the use of drugs by breaking the compact people have with their governments that they will act in a civilised and humane way. So the whole point of the Global Commission was say, let's bring proper analysis to this issue based upon scientific knowledge, based upon evidence that we have, so that we can deal with this issue, which is an issue in our society, drug use and abuse, and of course the problem of addiction that can occur and really savage the lives of people. And then of course there's the very, very all too often problem of drug overdose leading to death. So I think we need to shift the whole balance to the human rights and dignity of people, plus their health as the focus. And in the Portuguese case, they spoke about going from criminalisation of people through to the humane patient type approach rather than a criminal type approach for people.
Now, shifting that balance, as you mentioned, and taking a humane-based approach, where then do we start with the Philippines? Because those championing safe spaces will tell you that they're all for humane, evidence-based approach, but they'll lament over access to evidence-based drug rehabilitation. That the poor do not have access, and oftentimes, if not always, the poor and the most vulnerable are the ones who are easiest to fall.
Just a first point there, the Global Commission has taken up the question of pain relief medication that ought to be available to people. And this is one of the great inequalities of our modern society and modern global economy. So that has been a real issue there, to make sure that there's equality in the system when it comes to the provision of all life-saving medicines, absolutely pain-killing medicines that are necessary for our society.
So what is the Commission intending to do to bring this equality and ensure that there will be evidence-based rehabilitation, even for developing nations and emerging markets like the Philippines?
Well, the Global Commission has a research function, of course, and also an advocacy function. It must bring to the table all of the research we have about this issue and why it is that one particular approach might work better than another one. So when it comes to the Philippines, I think it needs to have an overview of all of the issues that have been raised in the research, and then secondly, look at the specific problems that exist that have led to change in other countries. Portugal had a major heroin problem in the 1990s, and they sat down and said, well, what are we going to do about this? And they came up with their reform package of decriminalisation for all drugs. In Switzerland, back in the 1980s, that one of the major parks in Zurich had open air drug use and injecting going on. There was a law and order issue, and all of the community members plus the police plus the government got together and said, we need a new approach to this issue rather than the war on drugs approach. You go to that park now, and of course it's a wonderful place to be. So I think use the evidence, but make sure it's relevant to the needs of your particular country. And you know, there are a lot of options in this area. The Global Commission wants all of those options in an ideal world to be put into place. Treatment, as you've just indicated, is very important. You can't have a decriminalisation strategy that will necessarily be sustainable through time if it doesn't, it's sustainable through time in the system, if it doesn't take into account treatment services as well as law.
To get the Commission to bring forth that knowledge and research, who will you be speaking with here in the Philippines to ensure that this gets across and gets implemented real fast?
I think it's important. There's the users, the people who take up the cause of their own fellow men and women and that are joined in and have an advocacy issue in the system. They're very important. It's very important to get the experts so that, I mean, this is not an easy area. This is a complex area, and we do need proper. It's easy to get on the bandwagon and wave the flag, but unless you have a sustainable approach with evidence, a way of implementing it, as well as advocating for it, you're not going to win the support, as much support. The other thing is, in some jurisdictions, we've seen the specialist attempts at consultation. In Ireland, they had a citizens' assembly, and the assembly looked at this very difficult issue of drugs and made certain recommendations to the government. So I think the people have to be in on it. The people have to. It's no good the governments of the world doing this from a top-down approach. They need to have the people on side so that what they do, if it's effective, the particular strategy they adopt, that it's sustainable into the future. And that's something that I'm particularly interested in. It's one thing to have an idea. It's another to have it, to put it practical implementation.
That's a call to action to the civil society here in the Philippines, which I thank you so much for continuing that conversation, Geoff. Commissioner Geoff Gallop of the Commission on Global Policy on Drugs, the former Premier of Western Australia, joining us live from Sydney.